So if you could tell me kind of what decisions writing or defining your personal statement when you, and again thinking back when you were probably graduate school, sort of what led you to start with the kind of CD story with Encyclopedia Britannica? And how long? I guess how like how did you come up with this kind of opening and sort of what other kind of things were you considering besides this one?
Yeah, I had received advice that they wanted you to kind of think about what brought you to research in the first place. And this was not something I had in my personal statement for graduate school, so I was just kind of mulling over how did I get here into the field of research. And I thought this was like researching things and fact finding was something that I really was drawn to as a child. So kind of I was brought to that story. And then I kind of went to debate, and that was also a lot of research. But then I wanted to move beyond that, and I thought that was just how I came to this field.
Okay. So I guess this seemed clearly to be a formative moment in your life,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Did you have other sort of formative moments that you had considered, or anecdotes that you considered that you thought, well, maybe I'll try this, or did this just kind of leap out at you and you thought, yeah, this is me, I gotta use this?
There wasn't any other things that came to mind. I think I did have the initial thought about Encyclopedia Britannica, but then there was kind of a gap between that and my research in college, so I kind of was thinking about other experiences that were related to research. So.
And so is it really true that Christmas and birthday were distant second and thirds?
Yes, that's true.
It is
yep.
true. Okay. Okay, just had to clear that up.
Yes.
For the record. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Here's just out of curiosity, because I have to ask,
Yeah.
since you're here. The whole thing about, like, what led you to include the stuff about fairy rings, cloud seeding, and...
I was just very passionate about those particular subjects.
What about them made
I
you
don't
so-
know. I was just really interested in those things as a kid. I remember I wrote a report on cloud seeding at some point. I wrote a story that incorporated information about the Patagonian desert, so
But they have nothing to do with your research now.
I don't know.
Okay.
I actually like reading encyclopedias.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's still persistent.
Yep.
Okay, it's persistent. Okay. Do you contribute to Wikipedia?
I do some editing on Wikipedia, yeah.
Okay. On what topics? In psychology, or is it other kind of topics?
When I find like errors, I'll just correct them.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, so moving on, second paragraph, Lake Forest College.
Yeah.
And again, this is pretty close to what you had written in your final draft.
Right.
But can you kind of talk me through the process of what you decided to include and why?
Yes. So I thought I struggled with this a little bit because it is very unrelated to what I do now, and I wanted to know like how much detail should I include and what should I draw from this experience. So I just very briefly mentioned that, things I was researching there, but then I kind of focused more on what I gained from it and what kind of transferable skills came from that experience. So like collaborating, overcoming obstacles, and then really like bringing that knowledge to the Lake Forest community. So I try to focus more on that than the specifics of the biological research.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, what you had to do was show the shift from original kind of, or the initial research experience to what you're interested in now, but
Right.
again, it's not it's not a straight and narrow path, but
Right.
you kind of took experiences nevertheless and skills nevertheless from
Yeah.
that first initial experience with you to the future.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And so what, I guess...
This was something I changed.
This is, just looking at this, there's a fair amount of technical detail.
Is there?
Well, I was matched with, and we investigated the roles of potassium and phospholipid lipase, A2 to the regulatory volume decrease of alligator red blood cells.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay. But no, then you get into, again, sort of the discovery, the joy of that, and then moving on to the collaboration and creatively overcoming obstacles.
Yeah.
curious why you didn't include like what some of those obstacles were and list them.
I thought that they were just very specific to that thing. Like the Z2 Coulter counter didn't work for a period of time during that experience. I don't think the reviewer of this would really care.
Sure.
So I just kind of said
Overcoming
overcoming
some-
obstacles.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then again, you move down to the next line to what you got out of that experience.
Right.
Okay, great. Next paragraph, the summer following, which is, again, virtually identical.
Yes.
You did include in the final draft, you include the swan.
Yes.
And what led you to that kind of level of specificity as opposed to this, what led you to name it and
Mhm.
identify it as opposed to just saying, here's what I'm interested in?
Yes. I think this was the transition that I struggled with the longest, and I went back and forth with my group members in my grant writing class for a
Yeah.
long time, because I wanted to keep it the way I originally had. And
Yeah.
they're like, we need a bigger justification for why you went from, researching red blood cells to focusing on sexual assault. So there needed to be something there. But I thought maybe if I just provided some more detail about the experiences that inspired me to change, maybe it might make it more coherent. And I think that's the biggest issue with a lot of this, right? So my experiences are all very, happenstance, or they're not very linear. So I
Yeah.
kind of had to create a narrative, even if it didn't feel like there was one at the time.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's like looking back, you can kind of narrate
Right.
the straight line
Yeah.
or the path, but you can't necessarily do it at the time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so this needed to be more of a kind of transition from, again, here you're going into the real technical details of biology.
Yes.
And then now you're going into this kind of larger stepping back to societal kinds
Right.
of issues. Okay, organizations with the administration to revise its sexual conduct led me to wonder what beliefs engaged. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just looking at the final draft, and it does show a clearer transition to, again, from that kind of path. Because in the prior draft, it just says social activism, and then from social activism to structural issues.
Right. And it's like that doesn't pose a specific research question, but I think this one kind of does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And this is, again, feedback that you got from your peer group.
Yes.
Okay. I guess, did you agree with that when they pointed that out to you, that it needed that bigger transition initially? Or did you see it at a clear?
No, I
You
didn't agree.
didn't?
No, and I thought it was fine. I was really set in my ways for a long time. So it took me a while to really mull over how I can make it different.
And so when you say it took you a while, can you give me a sense of like a week, 2 weeks, hours?
Like several weeks. Yeah.
Several weeks?
Yeah.
So you're saying it took you about several weeks to get from just those 2 or 3 sentences?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Again, I'm just trying to give other people a sense about
The timeline.
the timeline, because these, again, that it looks really effortless
Yes.
from in the final draft, but again, to give listeners or whoever read this a sense of the sort of blood, sweat, and tears behind
Yeah.
this. So, okay, good. Okay, so then you go back into, and this is virtually identical in terms of Susan Long, community psychology. You did kind of lit review. I'm noticing there's not too much of a difference.
Right.
To ensure, yeah, it's virtually identical.
Yeah.
I went to, okay. So during my time, we also worked with, and that's
Yeah, that's pretty
virtually
much
identical.
the same. It's the end that's different for that
Okay,
paragraph.
The end of during my time, and so let's start this over.
So,
Okay, yeah. So I was soon determined, okay, in the rough draft it says, I was soon determined to learn the art and science of factor analysis. Okay. And then you changed it to, I could apply it to a new question. So tell me a little bit about sort of what led in the final draft to an an actual specific question from more of a kind of statement in the rough draft.
Yeah, I thought that it felt not entirely connected. Like, why did I choose to do my senior thesis, given the work that I had already done before in that lab? So I thought that I needed to really make that transition more coherent. And just for time frame wise, like that was like the week that I submitted it, I changed that sentence. So it took me that long to come up with something that was a better transition.
So when you say that long, how?
It took me like from the beginning of school to almost when I submitted it, so probably several months to come up with that logic to myself.
Okay. And when you say that logic to yourself, can you explain more?
Like how I derive, or what would be the connection between the question I had when I started in that lab and the question that became my senior thesis. That connection wasn't made for me for several months. Yeah.
Okay. And so, and then, but I guess I'm curious, though, you do a good job in terms of tracing that link, but sort of just even the phrasing or the structure of it. So when you ask, in the final draft, when you ask the question, do they mutate into more covert forms in order to evade recognition? So that, how can I say this? Not only did it take you time to conceptualize that, but it also just framing it in that way
Yeah.
took several weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I'm sorry, several months.
Several months, yes.
Okay. And so can you remember kind of what was running through your head when, like what other alternatives you had at that time to try and frame it?
I don't remember what the alternatives were. Yeah, I think maybe I just originally, maybe my thought was like, oh, it's related to making a scale, but I thought that wasn't compelling enough of a justification. So I think focusing more on the content was important. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, but so it was kind of clear to me, as well as you talking in this conversation, that this was a key shift.
Yes.
In the whole statement itself.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So then you go into the next paragraph the following year. It's pretty much verbatim.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you kind of, upon graduation.
Yeah, this was a hard thing to write as well.
What made it hard?
Because I applied to a ton of research jobs when I graduated, and I only got one offer that paid, and it was this one, and it was completely unrelated to violence against women, right? So I need to finagle some sort of justification here, and I even said, like, what did I say? What was it? Although this work initially seemed outside my primary area of interest, I soon learned that ME/CFS is an illness that disproportionately affects women, and that leads to sexist dismissals by the medical community. And I didn't even realize that at any point when I had that research experience for 2 years. So, but I thought that was a creative way to connect it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, again, just let me summarize. So, when you were actually in this position, you had no idea.
I didn't really draw that connection, no.
What then led you to draw that connection? Do you remember that time?
I don't know. I was just mulling it over, and then I
When were you mulling? Was
during
it over?
the grant writing class. I was thinking about it, and I was looking at my list of conference presentations, and I was actually an author on one that talked about sexism in the ME/CFS field, and I was like, oh, yeah, that was something I did. So that was the connection I made.
So you were actually in a totally unrelated kind of, or this was just a conference presentation you were attending, and somebody just happened to mention?
Or no, I was like a second or third author on a poster that was on this, and I had forgotten, so.
Oh, so, okay, so you were, so this was, you were looking in your CV?
Yes.
So you just happened to look at your CV.
Yeah.
And then you noticed, oh, I did this.
Yes.
Oh.
Sexism, what do you know? So.
And this only came up through this grant writing course.
Yes.
So this was like months after you had, I don't know what the timeline is for the actual poster. But
yeah. So like several years later.
Several years later, that you noticed that you had this thing, like, oh, okay. And then and again, it was in the course of the sexual grant writing course that
Yes.
you actually, they connected those dots.
Yes.
Okay. Because no, I think and again, this is connected to what you mentioned earlier in terms of the red blood cells and the alligator kind of transition of, it's only later that you realize, like, here's how I can connect these dots, even
Right.
though this is not at all connected to it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. And let's see, additionally, that's pretty much the same. This method, this is pretty much the same. Primary article, okay. All right. Oh, actually, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the last sentence of the second paragraph on the second page, which is the following year it set out. Upon graduation, efforts in the classroom, you got this award, blah, blah, blah. What was running through your mind when you added that?
Let's see.
Upon graduation.
Yeah. I think just kind of weaving in like things that I've accomplished, because I know that there is a place when you apply to just kind of list them on the website, but it's not really embedded in the narrative, so I kind of wanted to put that in there.
Okay. Did you find yourself doing that naturally, or did somebody have to tell you? In terms of like basically, tooting your, what some people say, tooting your own horn.
Yeah, it is uncomfortable, but I read some other proposals that had been awarded for the NSF, and they kind of mentioned these things when they got a senior prize or other important accomplishments, so I thought that I should put that in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I asked that question because I know that some people think that just including it in the CV or the list of accomplishments, that's sufficient.
Right.
But oftentimes people read these quickly, and so it helps just to have reinforce it a couple times.
Right.
Okay, great. So this is virtually the same, the independent projects, CCR, but project, this grant.
I think the only difference is the end of that.
Our manuscript.
Yeah, I used the jigsaw puzzle before.
It's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, and then in the final draft, you did not include the jigsaw puzzle
No.
kind of thing. Why not?
What was my new phrasing on that?
Hold on. Our manuscript, which is currently population, draws upon the expertise of individuals from a diverse array of fields, blah, 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 blah. They just list them.
Yes.
And then you didn't. Is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle.
I think my advisor was the one who didn't like the phrasing here, and I think she said it sounded kind of incoherent the way, or not incoherent, it just said it seems like this sounds a little bit jumbled.
Okay.
Yeah, but this sounds like more coherent, I don't know.
It just sounds cleaner. I mean,
Yeah.
you're just getting to the point
Right.
of the jigsaw puzzle.
Right.
I can see why you would use, because it was kind of a jigsaw puzzle, interdisciplinary, these
Yeah.
fields and things like that. But for, just for concision, just to drop that. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. 2 years you spent at CCR, that's virtually identical. Applying to graduate school, University of Minnesota in particular. Okay, say a little bit more about that in terms of applying to the University of Minnesota and what led you to, I know that you mention it here in terms of this is why you applied to the University of Minnesota, but can you remember back and think back when you were first year applying? Is this an accurate reflection of what you were thinking about at the time, or is this again one of those sort of retrospective sense making?
I think I definitely could have said more here. I know some people in their statements kind of say like, you know, my advisor is world renowned in this area and very much aligned with my research interests in this way. I kind of was just very brief about it, but also when I got into graduate school, it was one of those things where I only got into one school, and so this is where I ended up going. But it was a great fit for my research interests in terms of studying violence against women and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Okay. So it was a good fit, but it was the only fit.
It was the only fit is a theme in my statement.
They don't have to know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. At the very tail end, you do talk about getting something from the GSDO.
Yes.
Academic, first gen, economically disadvantaged. I too had a place at the University of Minnesota.
Right.
So that's kind of a little different from the framing, phrasing in the British draft. Tell me more about that.
I thought it was important to mention because I know that NSF does like to diversify the scientific workforce, and also that like money begets money, right? So I think it's important to mention that
What?
if you've gotten funded before, and they thought you were worth
unfair.
it.
That's so unfair.
I know
though.
it is
But you already
unfair.
have money. Why do you need more money?
Right?
That's
But yeah, so those were my reasons behind it.
Okay. So why? Just the framing. If you remember at the time, I too had a place at the University of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to do that, as opposed to just saying I was honored to be a recipient?
Did I not
So,
say it?
oh, actually, no, you didn't.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't. Okay. Okay. I guess this is, it's just tighter, the pagination. Okay. All right.
And then, yeah.
Moving right along.
This was the
to
section
the
that
text.
did the most difference.
Yeah, I did notice that.
Yeah.
So tell me more about this, from the rough draft to the certified draft.
So I had written some diversity statements for graduate school that did touch on some of this outreach stuff, but it wasn't something that I could just like use completely. So obviously I kind of struggled here because I did have a lot of outreach stuff, and I showed this to Megan, who led the grant writing class, and she was like, this is just it's a lot, and it's very list-like.
Yeah.
So I tried to make it more into a narrative, right? So what shows it is this one.
This one.
The second paragraph,
Okay,
I
the second
thought.
paragraph. Another large portion of my advocacy work. Yeah. So this is
Right.
This is here, but it's much more kind of narrative form. I mean, you talk a little bit about over the years. I found myself wading through seeing posters, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
In the rough draft, it just basically goes on to the next thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so what I get a sense in this first draft, or the final draft, is a sense of the process.
Yeah.
And the detail, kind of that texture.
Yeah.
That helps the reader, sort of moves the reader along. You talk about sort of the brain bee,
Mhm.
and the sort of there's a nice detail, elbow deep in slime, while teaching about hydrophilic polymers to local students from underserved elementary schools.
Mm-hmm.
Most memorable of all was the 3 years, and again, so it's more of that kind of texture that you
Right.
get.
Yeah, I
in
tried to
narration.
just kind of like briefly mention a couple of them to indicate that I have done a lot of things, but also then I tried to spend more time on that one experience that was really impactful for me, and I did do it for several years, as opposed to the other ones, which may have been more brief experiences.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wanted to emphasize at the end that it wasn't just something that I did, but also something that I conveyed to the academic community, so I wanted to put that portion at the end there about presenting. Yeah.
Okay. So you do spend a fair amount of time with the detail about this.
Yeah.
This example. Can you say more about what made it particularly impactful for you? I mean.
Yeah, I think it was really impactful because it was something that was a part of my coursework for my first year in neuroscience, and then I was in part of science clubs, and then I was part of really organizing this and recruiting all the volunteers and making the event happen. So I thought you know, and it was just really, really great to have this awesome day-long experience for these kids.
Sure.
And being able to share that with other people, so that made it really impactful for me.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. And then you also talked specifically about the first gen
Yeah.
experience, inspiring other students, and you get into a fair amount of detail. You
Yeah.
go